All right, everybody. We are so back. Welcome to This Week in Space. I'm your host, Joan Emerson Bell. I'm a tarot reader and astrologer, licensed mental health counselor, and I like to show up here every Monday at 11-ish a.m. Mountain Time to give you your weekly astrological forecast. I have been on a brief hiatus as I was co-facilitating a retreat in Greece with the brilliant Sarah Janes and a bunch of amazing folks. We went to Elefsis or Delphi, Epidavros. Got to see a bunch of really cool temples, do a bunch of magic, have a lot of amazing conversations. And what's up, Amy? Got to hang out with Amy Philbin in Crete, which was a great time. And yeah, now I'm back, and it's taken me a minute to recover and get back on my game. And so, yeah, figure I would start this practice again. Hello, nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, right. And just a heads up for people, if you missed joining me on this past retreat, I'll be helping out on the Oracular Dreaming Retreat next May in 2027. And Sarah Janes is taking deposits for that. So if you are interested in having an amazing dream, astrology, mythology, adventure in Greece. This one is going to be a 10-day retreat, and Ariel Gutman, who is an amazing astrologer, did a lot of work on the Venus star point and is just a brilliant human being, is going to be there as well. So, yeah. If you're interested in that, you can follow at Sarah Jane's Dreaming on the Instagram or go to themysteries.org. I'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes. But yeah, check it out. I would love to see you there because it's super cool. And Amy, it was great to see you. Thanks for meeting us in Crete and showing us around. All right. Other announcements? Yeah, now I'm back and getting back on my game. So my books are open for astrology and tarot readings. I'm doing them on the weekends. So if you're interested, you can DM me at Blind Stallion Space Wizard on the Instagram or go to my website, Camp Wizard Camp, and just drop me a line and we'll figure out a time to work together. All right, that is all of the advertisements. So without further ado, let's jump into this week in space, shall we? And I gotta say, I'm a little bit rusty. It's been a minute since I did this, so bear with me. But we'll see how this goes, shall we? We are looking at this week in space for June the 8th, 2026, through June the 14th of 2026. So, the first transit that we're going to be looking at is coming up tomorrow, June the 9th, when we have Venus in Cancer conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. This is going down at 25 degrees and 46 arc minutes of the cardinal water sign of Cancer, a sign where Jupiter is exalted. So, let me just share my screen for the folks on the YouTube so y'all can see what we're talking about here. Let me get oriented. Okay, so right over here at the 25th degree of Cancer, we have Jupiter and Venus meeting up in the sky. So, all right. So, when Venus and Jupiter come together, which happens once a year, we have the two benefics meeting up with each other. And when they form a conjunction, it creates a kind of a blending of planetary energies and forms sort of like a hybrid planet, like an uber planet. Um, so, because both Jupiter and Venus are beneficial planets, and benefics, this transit can be seen as objectively good. However, And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. Um, but I think that issues can arise with benefic transits in the sense that we can have high expectations about how we might expect these planets or transits to operate in our lives. And if it doesn't meet these expectations, we might feel disappointed or let down. If we're not meeting the love of our life tomorrow or receiving all of the admiration and experiencing all of the joy and acclaim that we feel that we deserve during this transit. And so we might want to just manage our expectations a little bit, okay? So, um, something to consider is that oftentimes what we think is good and what is actually good for us may be different. Jupiter is a planet of wisdom, and it requires some wisdom to kind of separate out what we think we want from what is actually right for us. And Jupiter is invested in knowledge and learning and the creation of systems that function on trust. During Jupiter transits, we are asked to practice faith and to kind of trust in the processes that we are embedded in and to learn from our experience. Um, and I will come back to your comment in a minute. So while Jupiter is associated with luck, luck doesn't usually help us learn. If our expectations for this transit are too high or our focus is too narrow, we may miss the benefits that are actually available for us. So Jupiter asks us to expand our awareness and what we think can be possible, and to consider the wisdom that we hold at a somatic, experiential, and soul level, and to allow that to help us to cultivate faith in what is important to us. Also, a conjunction is sort of like a new moon. It is a seeding moment in the cycle. So, this is the completion of the last Jupiter Venus cycle and the beginning of a new one. And so, instead of holding the expectation that something really great is supposed to happen today, can we just sit with this in a kind of bigger picture type of way? So the last time Venus and Jupiter were conjunct was August 11th of 2025. So we might want to take a minute and think back over what unfolded in the Venusian and Jupiterian areas of our lives since then, and to think about the things we want to set in motion as that cycle draws to a close and a new cycle begins. Jupiter and Venus are both benefics, and benefics are life bringers. They give life to things. And Cancer, the sign where they're conjunct, cares for the things that are important to us and the things we give birth to. So we might want to consider what we are wanting to bring to life under this conjunction and the ways that we can care for the things that we give life to in our lives. Just something to consider moving through the beginning of the week. And I'm going to unpack this a little bit more because I think that this is a kind of important transit. It's a big one. So, Jupiter is the planet of wisdom, knowledge, wealth, learning, righteousness, law, philosophy, religion, spirituality, culture, joy, and blessings. Jupiter is expansive and it elevates things and it fosters understanding and bigger picture thinking through learning, experience, and the expansion of wisdom. Jupiter doesn't give us something for nothing, though. Rather, Jupiter helps us to develop trust in ourselves and faith in life. And it is from these inner states that that we are able to cultivate the external blessings that we receive. Jupiter is a planet of relationships, connections, pleasure, love, beauty, aesthetics, and values. Venus deals with what we find valuable and where we choose to place value. This includes how we value ourselves, um, how we value ourselves, and the level of self-esteem and self-worth that we experience. When Venus and Jupiter come together, it can help us to expand our sense of self-worth and expand our sense of connection. It can also increase our pleasure and joy. Jupiter is not interested in mindless or hedonistic pleasure. It is more concerned with the experiences that help us to grow into life and into ourselves. With this transit, there can be a desire to increase what feels good. And if we have a kind of compulsive nature like I do, we can want to keep adding and adding and adding without taking the time to check in and see how this experience actually feels. Because too much of a good thing is not necessarily a good thing. Too many sweets, too much alcohol, too much partying can actually feel kind of awful. Instead of seeking the best time ever or overconsumption, this relationship between Venus and Jupiter helps us to elevate our understanding of life through the recognition and experience of joy, pleasure, beauty, and connection. And these things occur in the moment. This is not the sort of seeking or grasping. Ooh, Thank you, my friend. So Jupiter makes things bigger, and bigger is not always better. As Venus and Jupiter meet in this conjunction, it can expand Venusian issues, bringing them into more of a conscious view or making them impossible to ignore. So if we're experiencing relational issues or issues with self-worth, Jupiter can magnify these problems. Same thing if we are experiencing issues with substances, Jupiter can magnify these problems. And Venus and the Venus Jupiter response is usually to kind of cover over the things that feel bad with the things that feel good, which there is nothing wrong with, but it might be more skillful to seek to expand our understanding and knowledge of what is arising rather than trying to kind of shut down what feels uncomfortable by indulging in something else. Jupiter is expansive, and in Cancer, it is expanding what we care for and how we care about it. With this conjunction, we can consider the ways that we show care and the ways in which we feed what we love, as well as expanding our capacity to receive love and connections that nourish us. Jupiter also elevates, and with Venus, it can elevate love and beauty from the physical and the material into the realm of the spiritual. Jupiter is a planet of spirituality, and this transit can help us to kind of access love on a devotional and spiritual level, where interpersonal love and appreciation can also open a doorway into divine love that transcends the physical or material plane. This can help us to expand our understanding of what love is and what our connections are from something that exists in the finite realm of time and space to something that allows us to connect with something greater than ourselves. And this can help us to shift our perspective of love as something that is from something that is limited and conditional to something that is abundant, renewable, and always available. So, at their core, Venus and Jupiter both deal with trust. Jupiter governs the social contract and the healthy functioning of society through the bonds of trust that we create between individuals and systems. If that trust breaks down, as it is in various areas of life, society suffers and systems stop functioning. Venus deals with the trust formed in relationship, be it friendship or intimate partnership. As Jupiter expands our awareness of situations and circumstances, it may increase our understanding of how trust operates in our relationships and in our lives. And this can also expand our awareness of the ways that we do or do not trust ourselves. And I think that self-trust is related to self-worth. And the degree to which we can trust ourselves is proportionate to how we value ourselves and the issues that can arise. An issue that can arise is a lack of trust in ourselves, which impacts our sense of self-worth, which then causes us to seek relationships, substances, or situations that we think will fill that inner sense of lack. However, if we cannot trust and value ourselves, we are probably not going to be able to replace that with external validation or appreciation. If we don't believe we are worthy of receiving love at a deep level, then even if someone loves us, it can be hard to trust that enough to let it in. If we don't trust the relationships that we have with ourselves, how can we trust the relationships that we form in our external world? These issues will come up later in the week when Venus squares Chiron. But the Jupiter Venus conjunction can help us to access resources and expand our awareness of ourselves so that when the relational wound gets activated by Chiron later in the week, we can approach it from a place of increased understanding and compassion. And if we practice leaning into the trust we are cultivating for ourselves, as well as the belief in love and supportive connections that are available for us in the human world, in the plant world, in the natural world, in the animal world, and in the unseen world, then we can find support even when things feel difficult or kind of grimy on an internal or relational level. And this brings me to my last thought on this transit. Again, Jupiter is expansive, and Jupiter can help us to expand our understanding of how we can do relationship. Supportive connection and meaningful relationship doesn't just come from other human beings. And relationships that we have with other human beings don't just need to look one type of way for them to be nurturing and meaningful. So we can cultivate, we can also cultivate relationships with nature, with ideas, with plants and animals, with spirits and gods. All of these relationships can be really supportive and beneficial. So maybe something to consider as you move through this week is to think about the ways that you can expand your definition of relationship and to see what relationships and connections in your life feel truly supportive and nurturing for you and to consider the level of trust that you have in those connections, as well as the trust that you have for the relationship that you have with yourself. And just seeing how this feels, because again, this is a seeding moment as the Venus and Jupiter cycle begins anew. And so, cultivating an expanded sense of relationality and trust in the world and in ourselves, I think, can be really supportive in kicking off this new Venus Jupiter cycle. Okay, so that brings us to the second transit that we will be experiencing on Tuesday, June the 9th. Um, yeah, and Garrett saying, no seeking, just being. That's what's up. And that's kind of the theme for the week. So thanks for picking up on that, my friend. Um, and Intractable Void saying, oh shit, self-worth too. I appreciate your depth of older astrological knowledge and mythology so much. Thank you very much, my friend, and thank you for tuning in. Okay, let me go over well, so on also at the same time that the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is occurring, we have Mercury in Cancer squaring Saturn in Aries. This is occurring at 12 degrees and 58 arc minutes. So what I'm going to talk about with this Mercury Saturn square is also going to be in effect during the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And astrology is not one isolated event. It never is. It is the composite of everything that's happening in the sky at that moment. And so we will be feeling multiple things. And so, again, the expectation that everything's going to be great because there's a great transit doesn't take into account other things that are happening in the sky simultaneously. So, just something to consider. So, let me go over to the chart and point this out for the folks at home. So we have Mercury over here at 12 degrees of Cancer. There we go. And that is in a square to Saturn over here at 12 degrees of Aries. And a square is a tense aspect, which, can cause some challenge. Saturn is a planet of limitation and solitude and austerity. And Mercury is about exchange, interaction, communication, and information. So when these planets are in a hard aspect like a square, it impacts communication. And we might feel misunderstood or like what we have to say falls on deaf ears. And so communication and exchanges may get slowed down during this transit. So this is a good time to practice patience. So for example, you might text somebody that you're like, I'm so into you. Venus is conjunct Jupiter. This is the day. And it might take them a couple days to get back to you. And so, again, that might kick off some internalized stories. So just practice patience. And sometimes delay may be something that ends up benefiting you in the long run. So just consider that. This is not necessarily about instant gratification. So if things feel a little wonky on Tuesday, see if you can just roll with it without trying to push too hard on something that might just require a slower timeline at the moment. And this might feel a little frustrating, but this transit is short-lived, and we will be in the glow of the Venus-Jupiter conjunction for a minute. So don't let this get under your skin. Mercury contacts with Saturn can be good for helping us to focus our mental energy. And while a square is a challenging aspect, we can put it to good use by directing our minds towards projects and tasks which require mental discipline and focus. So, Saturn is connected with the melancholy or depression. And so we may find our thoughts turning to sort of a little bit of a pessimism under this transit, which might feel like kind of a come down from that Venus Jupiter optimistic energy. And so, yeah, during the Venus Jupiter conjunction, we might have felt this sense of optimism and expansion. And now Saturn is kind of busting our bubble and maybe causing us to doubt some of the things that brought us joy and a renewed sense of hope. And Saturn is kind of looking on the dark side and feeling lonely. And so, while it might be helpful to have some pragmatic, strategic, and practical thinking to balance out some of the pie in the sky energy of the Venus Jupiter conjunction, don't let the pessimism or overcritical eye of Saturn square to Mercury kill all of the joy, all right? Saturn Mercury transits can bring up inner critic stuff, which can feel pretty uncomfortable. But try and remember that the inner critic is just one perspective, and the role that that critic plays is often to try and keep us safe and to help us manage our expectations so we don't get hurt. So, if we can remember that the pessimist and the critic are just perspectives, just stories that we're telling, perhaps we can approach them from a place of maybe a bigger and more integrated picture and help manage some of these parts of ourselves and remind them that we have the ability to stay safe without needing to look on the bad side of everything. At the same time, perhaps there is some wisdom in these perspectives that the square can bring, which can help us to approach the things that we care about in grounded, centered, and practical ways that can help us to develop plans to achieve our goals and to care for the things that we care about in sustainable ways that will last over time and not just flicker out after the Venus Jupiter conjunction separates. You know what I'm saying? Saturn is about the long term, and Mercury is like, cool, let's figure this out. Let's figure out a good plan so that this can be sustainable in the long run instead of, oh, I'm just going to enjoy this right now and then forget about it tomorrow. So, excuse me. That brings us to Friday, June the 12th. Is that correct? Let's go to second chart. Yes. Okay. So we got a couple things going on Friday the 12th. The first thing that we have is Uranus in Gemini square the nodes in Virgo in Pisces. This is going down at 2 degrees and 42 arc minutes of those mutable signs. So right here we have the South node in Virgo looking like upside down headphones. Over here, opposing that, we have the North node in Pisces looking like headphones. And then we have Uranus right here at 2 degrees of Gemini, forming that T square. So this week we have Uranus, the planet of sudden change, liberation, and innovation, squaring the lunar nodes. And this transit will be in full effect during Sunday's new moon and is one of the major aspects of this new moon. So I thought I'd take a moment to include it here. I don't talk so much about the transits to the nodes because they are not planets. They're seen as shadow planets. They are mathematical points where the eclipses occur. And being eclipse points, they are connected with themes of fate as well as shifts that shape our destiny. They are always opposing each other and they create a kind of cosmic or karmic tug of war. There's the North Node, which is a place of, or Rahu, the head of the dragon, which is a place of unmet desire and increase that keeps us sort of striving and pulls us into incarnation, seeking to fulfill our hunger. And then there's the south node, or K2, who is the tail of the dragon, which is a place of decrease, detachment, loss, sorrow, and austerity. It is the accumulation of our past experiences and our familiar patterns, which can keep us trapped in old cycles. And so the nodes are currently in Pisces and Virgo. They will be shifting signs over the summer. And so their tug of war is happening between themes of integration and analysis, acceptance and discernment, big picture awareness, and attention to details. Pisces is invested in spiritualizing matter, and Virgo is seeking to bring the spiritual into the physical world through practical action. And so there is a kind of constant back and forth between the nodes, a push and pull, a desire to stay the same met with the need to change, the need to let go, and at the same time, the desire to cling on to something or anything to help us to feel supported. And so this tug of war is part of the wheel of samsara, the cycle of action and consequence, which in Buddhist thought is driven by the three poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance, or attachment, aversion, and delusion. And so the square from Uranus can help kind of disrupt this cycle for a moment. It doesn't really break us out of it per se, but it can help us disrupt this tug of war and that tension, that push pull, which can allow us to kind of shift our perspective and find innovative ways of approaching the tension of the nodes and the engine of craving, aggression, and delusion that runs the show. Uranus is the liberator who can help us to wake up from the illusion through disrupting the patterns we find ourselves repeating. Uranus may disrupt situations which can cause openings where change can come into the system and old ways of being and seeing can become altered and shifted, which helps us to free ourselves from the illusions that we have been living in and to wake up to what is actually happening in this moment and in our lives, which helps us to find innovative ways of creating change outside of the structures that we have been used to operating in. So I just wanted to put a quick note on that in this report. And again, this is going to be, I think, very active during Sunday's new moon. So also Friday, June the 12th, we have Mercury entering their retrograde shadow at 16 degrees and 19 minutes of Cancer. So coming back to the chart, we have Mercury right there at that 16-degree mark, meaning that they will retrograde back to that point when they complete their retrograde and make their direct station, which will happen on June 29th. But yeah, Intractable Void saying trickster energy lubes up the friction of duality. And that's really true, right? The Uranus is connected with Prometheus, who is a trickster titan and tricks the gods into taking the worst portion of the meat for their sacrifice, which is, what kicks off the whole humans don't get fire thing. But, tricksters sort of look at the conditions or the tension that is in the world and they kind of push on the edges of it until things are forced to shift. Um, so just a brief overview of Mercury's retrograde journey. They enter their pre-retrograde shadow on Friday at 16 degrees and 18 minutes of Cancer. And they will station retrograde on June 29th at 26 degrees of Cancer. We have the Mercury Sun conjunction, or the Cazimi, on July the 12th at 20 degrees of Cancer, which is the sort of heart of the retrograde. And then they will station direct on July 23rd at coming back to that 16 degree and 18-minute mark of Cancer. And then finally, they will leave their shadow on August the 6th at 20 when they return to 26 degrees and 15 minutes of Cancer. And just a heads up, Mercury will be in Cancer from June the 1st, which was last Sunday, I believe, until August the 9th. So we have quite some time with Mercury in Cancer, dealing with cognition, communication, and exchange and information in the cardinal waters of Cancer. And so I'm not gonna Vera Long asked a really good question. Okay. Vera asks, are all the planets they or just Mercury? And I think this is personal preference. I like to kind of humanize the planets by referring to them with human pronouns, he, she, they, them. Also, I think that the planets hold both what can be considered masculine and feminine energies. And so I defer to they, and also I kind of just defer to they to anyone whose gender has they have not made explicit to me. And since, I have not communicated, none of the planets have told me specifically how they would like to be addressed, so I just default to they as a sense of respect for whatever their preference might be. But yeah, and again, I think all of the planets are containing both kind of masculine and feminine energies. And so I think it can be kind of pigeonholed to just be like, oh, this planet is this gender, because I think it cuts off some of the other deities and energies that have been syncretized with them over time, because the kind of Greek gods that we refer to in connection with the planetary energies are sort of amalgamations of a lot of earlier deities and local gods that have sort of been enfolded into the characteristics of the Olympian pantheon. And so, I think it's important to honor the nuance and complexity of these. Um, and yeah, and Mercury is seen as moving between genders, between day and night. They kind of occupy liminal space in the chart and also in the Greek pantheon. And so they are also seen as two-spirited in a lot of the kind of mythology or transgender or however you want to consider that. So, coming back to the chart, um, yeah, so I mean, I don't put a lot of stock in the shadow. Christopher Warnock, a great astrological magician. I was at a talk that he gave years ago, and he said something that I found fascinating. It was like when we moved from sort of Hellenistic or traditional astrology into modern humanistic astrology, we kind of did away with malefic planets in a way where, Saturn isn't bad. Saturn provides challenges, which I respect and I appreciate, and I think is true. And at the same time, we've sort of done away with the malefic qualities. So those malefic qualities need to exist somewhere. And so they kind of get embodied in Mercury's retrograde. And then, oh no, Mercury's shadow. And so the like bad in astrology finds a repository in the Mercury retrograde, and it's sort of the expanded awareness of the retrograde cycle. And I don't think that the retrograde cycle is bad either. But I don't put too much stock in the shadow. I do think it's important to note that as, Mercury enters its shadow, it's like, okay, like there is information coming up now and experiences coming up that we will need to revisit. So it's a good time to kind of make notes on, okay, like what's arising now. And when I revisit this, maybe I won't be so surprised, or maybe I will have a little preparation of how I can navigate this a little bit more skillfully. I think it's important to mention that Mercury's retrogrades are all occurring in water signs this year. And so this brings up themes of reconsidering our relationship to the element of water in our lives and how we engage with, process, and communicate our emotions and emotional connections. Mercury in water is gathering emotional information and assisting us with communicating our feelings. In Cancer, Mercury is concerned with what we care about and how we care about those things and how those things care for us. Mercury asks us to consider the information we receive about what is important to us at an emotional level and how we are connected through care and how we are connected to what we care about, as well as the information we gather from our feelings and our emotions. So when Mercury goes retrograde in Cancer, it may cause us to reconsider what we care about and how we express that care based on the information we are receiving from our emotional bodies. Cancer is interested in nourishing and nurturing the things that are important to us. And so we may go through a process of reconfiguring how we approach those areas of our lives, as well as reevaluating the ways that we are feeling fed by the things that we care about. So, with Mercury and Cancer, we may also find that emotions come to the surface more and more and come to the surface more and more, and conversations and exchanges of information operate on more of a kind of feeling and emotional level than on an intellectual level. But I think at the heart of Mercury's time in water is an invitation to cultivate emotional intelligence and listen to what our feelings are telling us about our interactions with the external world, as well as how the information that we gather from our emotions can inform us about internal processes and our perceptions of ourselves and the world that we are embedded in. So, um, um, And yeah, there's a I will come back to that comment in a minute. So also on Friday, June the 12th, we have Venus in Cancer squaring Chiron in Aries. And so we have Venus over here at the anaretic 29th degree of Cancer in a square with Chiron, the wounded healer, down here at 29 degrees and 44 minutes of Aries. And then we have this, it's kind of complicated here, but this red line in here indicating that square. So I think this is kind of a big transit of the week as well, and maybe sort of a bummer coming off of the Venus Jupiter conjunction. But let me walk you through it. So Chiron is guarding the threshold between the cardinal and the fixed signs, and planets that are moving through the gateway of cardinal into fixed will need to contend with the wound that Chiron reveals. So Venus does this on Friday, and Jupiter will experience it on the 29th, will occur right after Chiron has already moved into fixed Taurus, which occurs on June 19th, and is kind of a big deal. We'll spend some time on that when we get closer to it. So Venus is a planet of beauty and love. It is our aesthetic qualities and what we find beautiful and how we want to be perceived. It is also how we love and who we love and what we love, as well as our values and what we like and what we don't like, and where we place value and what we value. Venus's relation is relational. And through relationships, we see our values reflected in other people. And when we witness this reflection, it causes us to love and admire and appreciate them. Venus also deals with issues of self-worth and self-esteem, which are also connected with value and, at its core, how we value ourselves. So Chiron is associated with core wounding. It is oftentimes a wound that is unjust or unfair, which can keep us locked in a story and a thought loop, which can cause us to kind of spiral into feelings of shame, regret, resentment, and self deprecation, which are not comfortable feelings to have. So Chiron's wounds can be associate uh, so Chiron's wounds can kind of create internalized narratives which impact our sense of self and cause us to guard against experiences which might hit too deep or activate the core wound. A square is a tense aspect where two planets are at cross purposes, and they're each kind of vying to run the show. And ultimately, a square is seeking integration and growth. But oftentimes it's experienced as uncomfortable tension, which brings challenging issues to the surface. And in this case, the Venus Chiron square may bring up relational issues, feelings of rejection or abandonment, feelings of discomfort in our bodies, or discontent with our appearance. So, Chiron square Venus can impact our sense of self worth and cause us to reach for validation from others to soothe the pain that comes up from feelings of lack or insecurity, causing us to kind of seek external solutions to internal problems. However, With hard aspects between Venus and Chiron, there may never be another person who is able to love us enough or in the right way to heal the wound of low self-esteem, unlovability, or abandonment. This may create feelings of envy that others get to have what I don't get to have, which feeds into the Chiron narrative that life is so unfair. Just with Chiron, it's important to remember that the pain that is felt when the core wound is activated becomes suffering when we begin to tell stories about it, about how unfair it is, about how we are always shut out, about how we are undeserving of love. If difficult feelings arise during this transit, it is helpful to try and be with them and offer compassion to the wounded parts of ourselves without getting into a story or projecting our feeling into a bleak future where we are completely unlovable and cursed to be alone for eternity. This story doesn't actually do anyone any good and is based around the idea that love is a finite resource, which I don't believe to be true. And, again, we can access some resource for this with the Venus Jupiter conjunction and expanding our understanding of what love can be and the availability of it. But back to this Venus Chiron square. Can also bring up issues of body dysmorphia, feelings of discomfort in our physical forms, or feelings that we don't like how we look, which again, our minds can spin into Baroque narratives and project into the future. Stories like "it's always going to be like this," or that I'm totally hideous. It's a shitty feeling not to feel comfortable in one's body or to feel unattractive. And I guess the question is, can we honor the discomfort that these feelings create without concocting a story that it's always going to be like this and projecting it out into the future? And so, one of the issues that can come up with this square is the focusing on imperfections and the belief that things aren't enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not big, small, thin, round, tall, light, dark, whatever enough. This feeling of enoughness or the story around enoughness. And Chiron can kind of hone in on one perceived flaw or imperfection to kind of fit the narrative of the wound and shut out all other evidence that counteracts that story. And part of the integration process with this square is learning to love and find beauty in the perceived flaws. It is the imperfections which are what makes us human and what makes us unique. And as Venus moves into Leo right after the square perfects, Venus learns that what makes us unique is what makes us special. And there's a sort of kind of digital or cyborg aesthetic, which has kind of infected the Venusian areas of life, where everything is photoshopped and filtered, which has created unreasonable expectations and beauty standards. Everything is becoming like looks maxing and retouched to fit an idealized aesthetic sense. And when our breathing, sweating, hair growing animal bodies fail to live up to these unattainable standards, it can create feelings of shame and inferiority. And so this transit helps us to love the roughness, the imperfections, without trying to sanitize or perfect it. This transit helps us to love what is and what's real instead of longing for a digital image of our idealized self. Chiron is a centaur, and the archetype of the centaur is half horse, connected to nature and intuition, and half human, connected to the rational mind, which is reaching for the divine. The work of the centaur and of Chiron is to integrate these two parts of the self, the instinctual and the rational, the animal and the ideal. And this sort of integration of what is and what could be. And this split becomes activated around the Venusian desire to belong, to be accepted, to be loved, and to be valued. And it raises the question of where we access self-worth and how we define our value. Is it dictated by how many likes or followers we have, by how many relationships we have, by how many clothes we have? Or is self-worth measured by something else? This is an important question to consider, and most likely issues of value and self-esteem and self-worth are going to come up around this transit. It may be helpful to explore these feelings in ways that feel safe and manageable to you. Because with Chiron, the wound is what leads the way to our healing. And if the wound becomes activated this week, which it might, can we trace that feeling back to the source and get some more information about what's actually happening here? Because this may provide really good information around what the remedy is for the pain. We may trace one of these activated feelings back to an early childhood memory of rejection or abandonment, which has become wired into our system and becomes activated anytime anything gets near it. These early wounds can create stories and expectations of rejection and pain. And the challenge is to find enough insight, compassion, and self-esteem to move beyond feeling like a victim or feeling shut out and rejected, so that we don't keep repeating these old patterns that were formed in the wound and that we return to over and over again. The idealized vision of love and connection that Venus represents may activate feelings of lack and unworthiness in the Chiron parts of ourselves. The feeling that love and connection are unattainable, which may create feelings of resentment, which ultimately may erode our self esteem even further, undercutting the parts of ourselves that are lovable and connected. The Chiron wound anticipates pain and rejection and kind of braces for the pain as a way to protect the self, which can cause us to seek out evidence to support the narrative that the wound creates to make sense of our experience. It is the mind bracing against the fall in order to protect itself and to protect what we love. So we anticipate what could go wrong. When it inevitably does, we will be ready for it. This is the brain trying to get ahead of the pain. But all that really does is to take us out of the present moment and to create a distortion, which separates us from the joy and connection that might actually be available to us in this very moment. When we are anticipating the pain of the wound or the loss or the heartbreak, it cuts us off from being in connection with what's right here, right now. And it severs the connection that we have with ourselves in the moment. Real intimacy and connection come from being present with what's right here in this moment. And this is what Chiron so desperately wants: to be in connection, to be seen, to be accepted for who they are, wounds and horse legs and all. But in bracing against the threat of rejection, they cut off connection with what is present and possible in the here and now. And so, can we let go of the story that the wound tells and just be with the feeling? Can we offer compassion to the wounded parts of ourselves without judgment and show up for those angry parts or those wounded parts or those abandoned parts and the ancient stories that they have been spinning? And can we bring some ease and some compassion to these places? Can we bring a sense of presence and love from the wise adult place that we get to occupy in the here and now? And can we stay in the present moment and stay with ourselves without shaming ourselves for how we're feeling? Can we open to caring for ourselves instead of rejecting ourselves and replicating these past rejections? And part of the work of this transit is to show up for ourselves in the ways that we wished other people would have shown up for us way back when, instead of repeating those patterns of shaming and blaming and rejecting that got us into this mess in the first place. We can just be with ourselves and breathe, just asking what is true in this moment, what we might need to feel a little safer, a little bit more secure in our skin. And this is what helps us to call Chiron out of their cave and cultivate a sense of stability and trust within ourselves and the feeling that we can be all right in this moment. And this moment too shall pass. And when we can practice this, it helps us to cultivate that sense of self-worth and helps us to place a value on ourselves as well as on this moment, which is all we really have anyway. So we might as well try and be present for it instead of living in an echo of the past or projection from our wound about what could go wrong in the future. And in the end, it is our capacity for pain, which can also show us our capacity for love. All right. So that brings us to Saturday, June the 13th. And we have Venus entering Leo. So this is the day after that Chiron square. All right. So Leo wants to share love through generosity, warmth, self-expression, and creativity. Leo wants to be seen for its unique and individual gifts, which it seeks to share from the heart with warmth and generosity, and seeks acceptance into the larger group through giving freely of itself and sharing its creativity and unique self-expression with others. It wants to love and be accepted and to be received and to receive love in return. And when Venus, the planet of love, beauty, creativity, and values, enters into Leo, we may find ourselves wanting to feel appreciated for our beauty, our unique style, for our creativity, and for our self expression. Venus wants to be seen for what it values, and it wants to share the things it values with others because this is an expression of love. And Venus wants to be valued in return for our authentic self and the ways we share our unique and creative gifts with the world. Authenticity is key to Leo. And if we are valued for something that is not authentic, it can create problems. If we receive positive feedback for our style or our sexuality or forms of self expression that are out of alignment with our authentic core, it can pull us away from ourselves and create cognitive dissonance. Or it can get us caught in the trap of needing to keep producing or contorting ourselves to receive the validation and praise that we desire, which then can create internal narratives which pull us further from our core sense of self. While Leo looks for validation, acceptance, and praise, we want to make sure that we are receiving that life giving energy from doing things that are aligned with our values and that help us to develop a sense of self worth and self esteem and a strong connection with that core sense of self and those core values, instead of receiving praise for the things that compromise our values and pull us away from our internal center. The core question with Leo is, how do we maintain our authentic sense of self while interacting with and navigating the complexities of the external world? With Venus here, it speaks to our core values and the ways that our interactions with the world, with others, and with the collective either reinforce our values or ask us to betray them. And honestly, it is oftentimes a combination of the both. But again and again and again throughout our lives, we will be given the opportunity to abandon or compromise our values. And we may even be rewarded richly for these forms of self-betrayal. And so with Venus and Leo, we get the opportunity to share what we love and value, what we find beautiful and connected to. And our job is to honor those things and ideally find the right audience, those that can receive the gift of our creative energy, of what we love and appreciate, and who can reflect that back to us without asking us to change our gifts or to contort ourselves to receive validation and acceptance. And this doesn't mean that you shouldn't be open to constructive criticism or feedback, but be aware of the places where you want to abandon yourself or compromise your values to receive more likes or to fit in or to feel seen. If that is the case, you might not have the right audience. And it's Venus and Leo time. Don't throw your pearls before swine, my friends. Instead of wasting what is precious and valuable, see if you can find the places where your worth, beauty, and creative expression are appreciated and your values are honored. If you do, I bet you will feel much better about life by the time that Venus finishes their tour of Leo on July 9th. Okay, that brings us to the last transit of the week that we will be talking about. And I will check the comments as soon as I get through this last transit for the sake of time. So, Sunday, June the 14th, we have a new moon in Gemini. This is occurring at 24 degrees and 3 arc minutes of the mutable air sign of Gemini. Let me go to the chart and switch that up. Okay, there we go. And I didn't put up the chart with Venus moving into Leo because you can imagine that. But here we go. Venus at 1 degree of Leo during the new moon. And we have the new moon over here with the sun and the moon at 24 degrees, 3 arc minutes of Gemini. And then we have that Uranus square the nodes still in full effect during this lunation. So New moons are seeding moments where we begin a new lunar cycle. Oh, before I get into this, before I get into this, uh, this new moon occurs at 7:45 p.m. Pacific time, making that 10:45 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, new moons, seeding moments where we begin a new lunar cycle. And so what is planted during the new moon begins to reveal itself at the full moon 2 weeks later. And so this new moon is happening in the mutable air sign of Gemini. And Gemini is ruled by Mercury and is interested in breaking things down and taking things apart to figure out how they work. Gemini is represented by the twins, and in Greek mythology, these twins were Castor and Pollux. Castor was mortal and Pollux was divine. And they were thick as thieves and great heroes until Castor, the mortal twin, was killed in a brawl. And Pollux was so distraught over the loss of his other half that he asked Zeus, his dad, if he could share his immortality with his brother. So Zeus transformed them both into the constellation of Gemini so that they could be together forever. So this story speaks about the kind of dual nature of the Gemini archetype, the light half and the dark half, the mortal part that is bound by the conditions of time and space and needs to conform to the laws of 3D reality, and the immortal half that is connected to the divine and strives for the ideal. Is the part of us that is time bound, which dies, and the part of us that is eternal and consistent. Gemini, like Mercury, its ruling planet, straddles the threshold and occupies twilight space. 1 foot in the day world of consciousness, of conscious awareness, and 1 foot in the night world of image, dream, and unconscious understanding. And Gemini itself straddles the spring and the summer, standing at the threshold of the shift of the seasons. Gemini breaks things apart and separates things out to get a deeper understanding of their components and their inner working. However, the goal of Gemini, I believe, is ultimately integration. The process of separating things out into day and night, black and white, the Castor portion and the Pollux portion is ultimately about recombination. Gemini creates the separation in order to understand the workings of the opposites and so that it can create something new. And so this sign asks us to sit in the tension of the opposites until something new arises. And this is something to consider during this new moon. The breaking apart and division of ideas and situations and concepts in order to gain a greater understanding of their functioning. And then offering ourselves the space to sit in the tension created by that separation and allowing something new to come into being, a new way of working or thinking, showing up, a new cycle that can develop over this lunar phase, a new combination of the elements of our lives that can support us moving forward and inspire us in new ways. The key is to be all right with the tension that is created through the process of holding the opposites. And the mind hates ambiguity, and it will tend to jump to conclusions in order to know and to break that tension and dissipate the discomfort. But can we allow ourselves to sit in this unknown, in this twilight space for a little while, under the dark of the moon, and allow the mechanisms of the deep mind to do their work until something new arises and inspires us? So there you all go, my friends. That is your week in space. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, I am available for tarot and astrology readings. If you are interested in one of those services, hit me up. You can DM me on Instagram or go to my website, Camp Wizard Camp, and get in touch with me that way. I'm doing my readings on the weekends, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, also Sarah Janes is taking deposits for the 2027 Oracular Dreaming Retreat in Greece, which is going to be a 10-day odyssey through a bunch of sacred sites. If you're interested in that, you can go to themysteries.org or follow her at Sarah Janes Dreaming. And yeah, other than that, that is all the astro weather that is fit to fit to print, my friends. It is good to be back. I hope you all have a great week in space. And yeah, until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the force be with you. All right. Bye now.